Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us for another episode of Independent Thought. I am joined by my guest today, Caitlin Geer, the host of the Switching Gears podcast. Caitlin, thank you for joining Independent Thoughts today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. I've checked out your podcast several times in like over the past year or so. I've watched a few YouTube videos, especially when you were talking about all the things happening with Arrow. I think that was like a few years back.
Oh boy, I have many thoughts about that show.
Yeah, that probably could be a whole separate episode, honestly, because I have also watched all 8 seasons of Arrow.
Just the
So
first two seasons were so good, and then it was like they just completely forgot about what they were supposed to do. And then
but
it turned in Felicity and Friends. I hate it.
we'll definitely come back to that. But whenever I have a podcast to come on the show for the first time, the first thing I always have them do is like tell me a little bit about their podcast. So could you tell me what was the motivation behind starting Switching Gears?
So Switching Gears, one obviously is a play on my name, which is I used to hate my name, and then the minute I realized that there were so many puns I could do, it was like it opened up a whole new world for me. But Switching Gears, I really kind of started a few years ago with my best friend because I wanted to prove that I had the talent, the drive, the whatever you want to call it, to host my own radio show, because I do have a background in radio. I worked in radio for about almost a decade. I think it was like 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. That sounds right. I started with an internship in college, realized that there's not a lot of really female-driven morning shows or even evening shows. There's just not a lot of like girl, female run. It is always a guy and then like the girl sidekick, like Bobby Bones.
Yeah.
Or Kid Craddock. They were very guy-centric, and then like one girl. With Amy and Kelly Raspberry. And which, first of all, fun fact, everybody in radio like hates Bobby Bones. Which is very funny to me. That doesn't matter. Anyway, so Switching Gears was kind of like created to where like, if I was having a morning show, this is what I would be talking about right now. Okay. And so I talk about everything. I have talked about zombies. I've talked about superpowers. I have talked about things going on in the world that maybe you didn't hear about. I've talked about so much, really.
No, it definitely seems like a lot.
Yeah, I could go on about so many different topics. I don't know if it stems from like because I have like the entertainment background that I do. I grew up in dance. I did theater. I danced for 15 years. Yeah, I danced for 15 years. I think I just maybe didn't get enough attention as a kid. I don't know. But the podcast was really fun for me. I haven't had a new episode up lately because I've been dealing with awful apartment hell. But we move in 2 weeks, and so I'm going to have episodes where I revisit some of my favorite rom-coms from like when I was in college and high school, talk about the wedding planning process and really about a lot of stuff. So I hit a bunch of different topics. It's fun.
Right. And that's actually the one thing I wanted to ask you is, since you do cover such a variety of things, what is your favorite topic to talk about?
Anything that gets me heated, I feel like, or that I'm passionate about, but that's a lot of things. Lately, okay, so I really liked, what were some of the episodes I did? I really like, take a drink every time I say like. I really enjoy true crime, but there's no way I could do an entire show dedicated to true crime. For one, the podcast universe is flooded with true crime. But it was fun to hit on like a few true crime cases that were local to Kansas that not a lot of people know about. It was really fun to hit on like hauntings in Kansas that I did. I love talking about scary movies. Really, I like talking about pop culture stuff the most, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely more fun to talk about than what I'm doing with politics. That's for sure. I mean, I thought for a little while there that maybe I could find a way to have a second podcast where I talk about pop culture stuff, but that did not last, unfortunately. So now we're just here with independent thought. And, speaking of politics, you told me briefly that you've actually met a prominent politician before. You said that you met the senator of Kansas, or a senator of Kansas.
Sure did. Roger Marshall.
What was that
I should,
experience like?
well, okay. I should ask this question first. Like, can I cuss?
Sure.
Okay. He is a fuckwad. He is the worst. The absolute worst. He is sexist. He is a misogynist asshole. I cannot stand him. When I worked at a radio station that was political and also sports, and it was heavily, heavily geared toward men. Roger Marshall came on to go onto the political station, came into the office. My desk was at the front of the office when you do enter in, but I'm not just like the reception girl. I was the director of traffic. So I was in charge of all of the commercials, literally loading and building the entire radio log all day long.
Okay.
And he comes in, takes a look at me, and he says something sexist like, "Hi, little lady." And I'm like, "Oh, why are you here? You're gross." And he just stares at you uncomfortably for a while, like, "I'm Roger Marshall. I'm so cool. I'm a doctor, but I don't believe in vaccinations." And he's just pretentious. He was awful. I was just staring at him like, I can't stand you. You are a tick, an evil little tick. And then he went off.
I've not heard someone say that insult in a long time.
I had to get colorful. I cannot stand him. He's the worst. And then since the whole insurrection of the Capitol, he's been a pit stain. He's been an armpit pit stain for the state of Kansas. And it's just annoying because I wanted the lovely lady, the other doctor, the lady, to win, and I voted for her and she didn't win, and I'm still a little upset.
Yeah, I remember back around the election time that I thought that was going to be a pretty decently close race, especially after your state of Kansas elected a Democrat for governor in 2018, if I remember correctly.
We have actually, which is really cool, we've actually elected a few Democratic women. We had Kathleen Sebelius, if I remember correctly, she was Democrat. And we had another one. And then, we have our wonderful one, and I love her. And it's really frustrating because whatever the correct term is, the Republican Party has basically roadblocked everything she tried to do to protect the state of Kansas from COVID-19.
Yeah, there was a lot of scandals around the country, not just individual states, but also in various businesses in regards to COVID-19, unfortunately. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today, was because you saw your own personal scandal at your workplace. And so I want you to kind of tell me a little bit about what exactly happened at this radio station that you worked in regards to unemployment insurance.
Here is some shit. So I worked at the radio station called Steckline Communications, and it had the sports talk radio, the political station. I couldn't even tell you what the actual channels were called because I've just tried to block it from my memory. But when the pandemic started, I was one of the few people there who was like, this is bad. I had been seeing, articles popping up about this mysterious virus that has originated possibly in China. It's really bad. People are dying. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be horrible if it makes its way over here. And then it did. And the pandemic started. And the whole country was in like this weird state of, what do we do? And the state of Kansas was starting to close down. And Governor Kelly closed the schools for the rest of the school year. And that's when we realized that it was getting very serious. So about that time, it was management. It was not the owner, Greg Steckline. And I will say his name because a lot of this is public knowledge, one. And second of all, if he didn't want it known, maybe he should have acted better. So management pulled us into the conference room, told us how we probably wouldn't survive the pandemic because radio is free to the public, but the way that we stay free to the public is by getting in advertising to the stations. Since a lot of businesses were closing down, we weren't really getting advertising, no money in. We can't really have money to run the station. So they pull us in and they sit down and tell us that. And then they say, you know, we're going to have everybody go on unemployment. And I'm like, dang, okay. And then they're like, you know, in a couple months, I think everything will be back to normal. It'll be over and we'll keep going on as usual. I went, oh, okay. So I get like a couple months off work. Fabulous. And then they start talking about how they want us all to keep working. They wanted us to be on unemployment, but keep working. That's fraud. Doesn't matter which way you spin it, it is fraud. And I was sitting there like, there's no way this is happening. This is not real. This is a joke. I'm being pranked. Where's Ashton Kutcher? But it was real. It was real. They just wanted all of us to go on unemployment. And management claimed that the owner would then, if we weren't making enough off of unemployment and the extra $600, I think at the time was for the extra a week for unemployment, he would pay us the difference in cash under the table.
Do you feel comfortable saying the name of this radio station?
Steckline Communications.
Okay. In Wichita, Kansas?
In Wichita, Kansas.
So what exactly transpired after that? Like after that meeting took place, did people accept that offer? Did people reject it? What did you do? Like what happened afterwards? Did this actually take place?
I was sitting there kind of like with I'm sorry, this isn't real. This is not happening. Look on my face. I probably had RBF. My manager asked me, they're like, you seem really worried about this. And I'm like, yeah, you're asking me to commit fraud. Oh, well, it's not fraud. You know, we're just all volunteering our time. Buddy, I don't think a judge is going to see it that way at all. So I went home. I talked it over. I talked to my then boyfriend. I talked to my dad. I called my mom. I called my brother, and I was like, what do I do? Because I didn't want to do it, but I also needed somebody else to tell me that I wasn't crazy.
Right.
And they're like, no, that's fraud. That's very bad. Very, very, very bad. That'll come back on you 1,000%. I said, okay. So the next day I said, look, I'm not doing it. I'm not comfortable doing it. Either you keep me on payroll or I walk. And because I was one of 2 people who knew the system, they knew that I was super valuable and they agreed to let me stay on payroll. But there was one other employee, I think, that had to stay on payroll because he hadn't been there long enough to even qualify for unemployment.
Right.
Everyone else took it. They really were on unemployment, getting paid cash under the table. When Greg felt like it, by the way, it was whether or not he felt like it that week. That went on for, I think, a month and a half, maybe 2 months. I can't remember how long exactly. We had another meeting said everybody could go off unemployment because Greg had gotten the
Paycheck protection.
yes, the PPE loan.
Yeah.
And you can actually look it up. This is public record where he got, I think, $250,000 for payroll. Kind of funny how he got money for payroll when he only had like 2 people on the payroll. So then as a result, and I only found this out from the lady who was filling in for HR, because we didn't actually have an HR. She was just kind of filling in, doing payroll for us. He was then putting his entire family on payroll. And I know he was because I saw physically some of his kids pick up the paychecks. And then I also heard, I think the daughter say that they weren't cashing them because they weren't supposed to. So he was literally giving checks to his family for thousands more than people were actually making. Like he was giving his kids $6,000, $4,000. I think his wife, he was giving her $14,000. And then they weren't cashing the checks. And I don't know how he hasn't been caught in any kind of audit because they were made in QuickBooks. They were physically printed. Whether or not they literally take out that money to cash it, there's still a paper trail. So all of that money is still in that account, or they did cash it and then they put it into a different account. I don't know. But I do know that he did get like $5,000 from Sedgwick County, where Wichita is located. And then he got $250,000 from the government that he doesn't have to repay.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on to talk about this is because right now we are living, amongst what some people, I guess you would characterize as a worker shortage. Now, there have been plenty of debates about like why there's this worker shortage, right? But the one narrative that you hear from a lot of people right now is that, people are just lazy and they're just staying on unemployment and they're just freeloading off of the system and that's just what they do. And that's the reason why they won't go back to work. This is a narrative that we hear a lot right now, especially, as you go to certain businesses and everyone's understaffed and everyone's upset about the fact that people are understaffed and they're just looking for some kind of a scapegoat to talk about like, well, see, this is the reason why all these places are understaffed because these lazy people are sitting at home collecting unemployment checks. I just wanted you to come on and talk about maybe a slightly different perspective about how maybe not everyone is staying at home collecting unemployment checks. Maybe some people are being asked to work at their jobs while collecting unemployment checks. Maybe some business owners are illegally seizing money that they should not be seizing, that they have no business doing so. And maybe this situation isn't quite as black and white as we all want to make it out to be, because it has honestly been very upsetting to me to hear just this disparaging of people relentlessly.
Same. And it's also infuriating to me because I worked retail for so long. I hope I never have to work retail ever again because I don't think I can handle another Karen yelling at me about why something wasn't on discount. A lot of it is people are fed up, one, with minimum wage and low wages, two, having to even deal with Karens. But then you add in a pandemic on top of that? Hell no. No. Mm-mm.
No, it's been an incredibly difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with. And I think there aren't really worker shortages at higher paying jobs. There aren't worker shortages at jobs that have benefits. There aren't worker shortages at jobs that have really paved out upward trajectories for their employees. There just seems to be worker shortages at minimum wage jobs, very high stress, like high demanding, low paying jobs. So just wanted to kind of point that out for a second for people. But on top of that, you also kind of told me that this was also a toxic work environment where you overheard some people referring to the vice president, saying that she slept her way to the top because that's what women do.
Yep. Okay. So this was without a doubt the most toxic environment I've ever had to work in. I do not work there anymore, so I don't really care what I say about them. I now work in a lawyer office. I feel like I'm spoiled because they buy me snacks and it is magical. But at this station, they were so far right wing, terrifying, scary, so sexist, so misogynistic, just the worst and racist. When it was announced that she was the VP, the guy who had his own little radio show, Andy Hoosier, he has his own show called The Voice of Reason. I don't know what kind of voice of reason he thinks he is, because he's wrong 99% of the time. He has his own show. You can go listen to it if you want to have a bad time. He's the one that said that. Another one of my coworkers said, and I got so mad. I was already mad to begin with because he said the woman comment. And I don't know if I had told you this part beforehand, but my other coworker who is in sales proceeded to say he only picked her so that she could be the token N-word, full on N-word. And I went, dude, you can't say that. What the hell is wrong with you? Oh, well, it's just true. That's just what they do. And I went, who? What are you talking about? You need to get out of here before I hurt you, because you're not making any sense. You're being an asshole. And I'm not working with this today. So you need to leave. And I yelled at them. I told them to get the fuck out of here. And I made them leave the office.
There are so many different things to kind of more or less unpack with that statement.
Yeah.
But, you know, I honestly, like right now, we are constantly dealing with a narrative in our media that says that, you know, sexism is way overblown, that racism is way overblown, that quote unquote, the left makes them into bigger deals than they actually are. And then we also hear narratives again that say that, you know, the reason why people, you know, are not showing up to work is because people are lazy. And that's the only story that you need to hear. And so there's a lot more that we could probably dive into as far as each one of those individual channels about why those narratives are insanely wrong. But I was just more or less, one of the goals of independent thought is to bring people on from all different walks of life, from all different parts of this country, to kind of just talk a little bit about their stories, so we can kind of like normalize the fact that these things are happening and that they're not just random stories here and there, but that they do happen all over the place. So Caitlin, thank you for coming on today and telling us a little bit about that. I really do appreciate it. As we're kind of closing this out, could you just tell everyone again where they can find you on social media?
At switching_gears, basically on everything. And it's Geers spelled funny, Geers.
Okay. And for everyone who's interested, if you want to like click down to the episode notes, there'll be some links in there that you'll be able to click on to find Caitlin's podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today. And to everyone else, I'll be right back after our final break and I'll give you my final thoughts of the day. Stay tuned.